Well, welcome to a very special bonus episode. This is our look at the big NRF show in the Big Apple, New York City. Just got back. We're just back in the chair, back on the microphone. So we thought we'd share some thoughts around, the show itself and what we heard and the people we met. Steve, it was so great to be together with you in person. I cherish those moments, and really, it was great to see you. We had a lot of fun days together, met a lot of people, and off the top, what was your first impression? You've been to a lot of these, as have I. So, what's top of mind first impression about the show?
Well, I guess the big takeaway is that the show is back. I mean, I don't know. I think you may have heard a little bit of some numbers, but I certainly felt like it was as big, if not bigger, than it was pre-COVID. And Javits seems to keep the Javits Center. If folks are familiar with that convention center in Manhattan, seems to keep growing, and so the expansiveness of it. I'm always impressed by the tremendous turnout from international contingents, the Brazilians. You and I got to spend some time with the Australian guys and gals, but you name it,
Lots
just
of,
the diversity.
Lots
Lots of Canadians and French, and just roaming around, hearing all these different languages. I thought the energy level was tremendous. People were really excited to see what was new, what was next, connect. We got to connect with dozens and dozens of our retail friends, getting to meet a few people that I feel like I know and have known for many years, finally in person. So it was a great time, very inspiring.
For the Voice of Retail, I interviewed the president of the NCR Retail, and he's now on the board of directors of NRF, and they were briefed that this was a bigger number than 2020, and 2020 was the last weeks, literally, before the pandemic hit. So that's a great news story for the NRF. It's a great news story for retail that they could bounce back so significantly after 2 years. It's a very important show for the association because it funds a lot of their activities at lobbying at the federal level. I mean, it's really the show that makes that association, pays the bills, and pays all the smart people that work for them. I had a great adventure. I mean, it always strikes me, this massive ecosystem that happens around. Like, there's what happens at Javits, and then there's all the things that happen in that city in the lead up to it. I mean, starting Friday, there's a Fiera meeting where all the associations get together on the Saturday. I did a retail tour of with about 50 CEOs and top Canadian executives going to visit stores, and it just goes on and on, right? It's a huge ecosystem. So it's really a wonderful start to any retail year that I think has been missing it's been missing for a couple of years.
Yeah, I felt like I was running around. I mean, we recorded a bunch of episodes of the podcast.
And you had a couple of gigs, right?
You and I and Gretchen Gans from the Container Store run the Big Ideas stage, I guess. Is that what they call that? But within the conference,
they were big ideas. So yes, I'm going to call it Big Idea stage. Yeah, they were
right. Whatever stage we're on is obviously big ideas. But so there was to your point, there was the things within the walls of Javits, and then some of the events that occur outside. So yeah, I spoke at 2 private events on Sunday and Monday night before running to the Rethink Retail Bash for the top influencers and a variety of other events in and around it. So yeah, it's fast paced. There's a lot it's like drinking from a fire hose, as you said, not necessarily in conference shape for some of these things. Realize I don't generally stand 14 hours a day. So that was a little challenging for my aging, achy bones.
And a special shout out to our friends at Marketile who hosted us in our little podcast studio that we set up in their booth. We did some great interviews, both in their booth, and we also, thanks to the folks at NRF, gave us some space in their podcast studio in the new North building, which is like the Taj Mahal of the Javits Center. I mean, it's really quite a nice building, though it's
nice, and it's much quieter, which is an advantage.
Much quieter. You kind of need an Uber to get there. I wish they had Uber golf carts at Javits. I think that's the next innovation. All right, enough of this tomfoolery. Let's get into, we talked about the overall conference, but let's get into what you heard, what was heard in the aisles, heard in the booths, heard on the stage. What were your top things that you walked away from NRF, the big show, thinking about from an industry perspective or trend perspective?
Well, I think a few things are top of mind. One, and I'm kind of a mixed opinion about this, but there was generally a theme, particularly on the Expo floor, but I think to a certain degree in the content as well, that physical retail is back. There was a lot more, certainly compared to past years where it seemed to be about almost all things e-commerce, that the store was a place to invest in very seriously. Now, probably no surprise to anybody. It never went anywhere. So I think this is kind of an interesting pivot. I think it's just like people got too caught up in the all things e-commerce, physical retail is dead or dying narrative of a few years. And as we've talked about a bunch of times, I talk about in my book, the stores strike back. They've been striking back, and there's kind of a new appreciation. But what it meant was that from a content standpoint on the stage, but as I said in the Expo, there was a lot of messaging around how to leverage your stores more effectively. So some of that was things like automation, because whether that's just walkout technology or just, kind of labor assistance to deal with labor issues. Which manifest as, how do you help your sales associates do a better job by giving them enabling technology? As folks will hear in a bit, we did a whole episode on store-focused technology, but Theatro is one of the companies that helps enhance sales associates in dealing with customers. But it's also, loss prevention, other kind of, robotics, automation, those kinds of things. And then there's also things that enhance the physical store experience. So you and I got to spend some time at Crave Retail, which, full disclosure, I am on their advisory board, but they've got a fitting room solution. Yeah, they're really doing well. But what I think is interesting, not so much about Crave Retail per se, but just thinking about, how do you take advantage of that store traffic and do a better job converting sales or cross-sell, upsell, or just creating a more delightful experience that will cause the customer to come back. And then there's also the more efficiency issues, which is, how do I maximize the labor I have?
Productivity stuff,
productivity. And if I can't staff the stores, how do I use technology to take care of the customers and keep my costs in line? So quite a lot there. Lots of discussion about AI, machine learning. Again, we'll have an episode coming up where we'll dig into that a little bit more with the founder of FindMind. But across the board, lots of discussion about the potential for AI. Again, sort of create a more effective experience, but also to maybe help take costs out and automate those more routine tasks that either cause turnover or dissatisfaction with associates, or just frankly, you can't get the associates to perform those tasks. So those were a couple. I'll have a few others, but I thought maybe turn it back to you to see what some of your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's to get your arms or a mind wrapped around it. I kind of go by sections, right? So I took a wander down on the first floor, which is always the floor where everybody starts, right? You work your way up. And interestingly enough, I sometimes find the most interesting things on the first floor because it's the strivers, right? They're just out of the gate. So I saw some interesting things around loyalty, again, connected to the stores, lots of AI, lots of automated solutions. And so everybody's trying to come at the same angle. I did the last day. You and I were sitting in the Market Dial booth, and someone I know, a CIO from a Canadian retailer, walked by for the counter narrative to ours, and I said, "Hey, what'd you think? You've been here for a couple of days." He goes, I expected more. I expected there to be more innovation because it's been gone for a couple of years. So I think there's a few people I talked to who said, what have we really accomplished in the past 3 years, which is an interesting perspective look at it. I said, well, to my friend, I said, there's a bunch of things. Have you seen this, 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 and this? And he goes, oh, I missed that. Which also, the conference is so big that the risk is, listen, I saw some pretty interesting things, but there's so much to see that you could skip a couple by accident and come away thinking that you didn't see what you were there to see. So it is the risk of that show. It can be so big that you miss the really, like Crave, I love what they were doing. And Glass Media, love what they were doing, right? I thought Theatro, I love what these people are doing. And, you can kind of miss a couple of those. But overall, I thought, your themes really resonate with me, right? The store not being back, but this focus on the store, focus on what I think is the number one issue in retail for the next year, 2, 3 years even, is labor.
Market Dial's easy-to-use testing platform emboldens great decisions, leading to reliable, scalable results. With Market Dial, you can be confident in the outcome of your in-store pilot initiatives before rolling them out across your fleet. In a challenging retail climate of supply chain disruption, labor shortages, and dynamic customer behavior, the need for reliable insights has never been greater. Validate your remarkable ideas with Market Dial's in-store testing solution. The proof is in the testing. Learn more at marketdial.com. That's marketdial.com.
And just going back to your point about how overwhelming it can be, one of the things that really struck me this year, though I don't know that it's that much different than the past years, is that when I used to go to NRF when I was working on the corporate side, I typically had somebody from, or more than one person from the CIO's organization going around with me, or at least guiding me. And so they would point me to some things that they thought were most interesting, or I would have said, hey, this looks interesting. What do you think? And they would say, that's not scalable, or that's very similar to these 7 other companies. It's really not that unique. And because it is a quite at least in the Expo, very technology focused show, it is hard for I'm not a layman, but I'm certainly not a tech expert to make sense of all this when it's just kind of row after row of things that often look quite good and glitzy. But is there any there? Talking a little bit about some of the messages on stage, I was sort of mixed opinions. I mean, there certainly are plenty of interesting topics, lots of very senior leaders that are featured on stage, whether we're talking about the main stage keynotes or some of the smaller venues. I did feel like we were kind of back to the future a little bit on, talking about resale, talking about sustainability, talking about DE&I. These are all important topics. I don't know that I really heard anything, or, I didn't get to everything. So in some cases I'm reading about it, didn't necessarily hear anything that was really breakthrough. I also think, and I'm not going to name names here, but people that listen to the podcast can probably guess some of the companies I'm talking about. But there were several CEOs that were up there talking about, the great success of their strategy. And I'm like, where's the beef on this? Like,
There's one in particular I have in mind, but I won't. I've always found the mix of speakers at NRF to be odd, if I could put it that way. Like, some of the programming I think is, they go sometimes for inspirational or aspirational or big picture. I'm not sure they always hit the mark. At least they don't for me. Maybe because it's some very niche, big profile speakers, but of no real interest to me in the retail context. I don't know.
So you didn't get a lot of specific retail strategy advice from Simone Biles? Is that what you're saying?
Well, not to name names, but I'm like, what an inspirational person! What a fantastic human being!
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm just, I'm not there for that. I don't know. I always found, but that's not new for NRF. They always make some kind of choices like that go for more inspiration. I guess it rounds out a busy couple of days, so I guess I could see it. But it's it's a good balance to some of the more technical or niche topics, perhaps. But I guess.
But yeah, I understand the association obviously is serving both very large retailers as well as smaller retailers, and so
I don't know.
trying to create.
What do you
some
think
balance.
of that? If you're a small niche retailer, is this really the show for you? Like like maybe on the first floor, but a lot of these booths, and they're not set up for indies, right? They're hunting bigger game than indies, man. Like, they need that to pay the rent. It's not going to be Bob's Hardware store in Duluth, Minnesota, right?
Yeah, I don't think for independent retailers, 1, 2, 3 store, that sort of mom and pop retailer, it's particularly helpful. But there is a lot that you can glean. You just have to be really careful in terms of figuring out how to navigate the damn thing. But, we talked to several people. This is not exactly what we're saying, but talked to several people that were new to working at certain retailers or new to the retail industry, now working at retail leaders. And I think part of the advantage you get from going to the show like this is you can learn a lot about what's going on in retail. It's not necessarily you're going to find this technology to take home, or it's not from a buying of technology perspective. It's really more what's going on, what are the key themes, who are the companies that are doing interesting things. I think from that perspective, whether you're working in the industry as a, say mid-level person, or maybe at a smaller retailer, that's the kind of knowledge you get. But as a place to go and make connections and procure technology, I think, it's definitely geared towards the medium and larger retailers.
Well, all this discussion has given me an idea for a new service for next year. Sherpa as service. How about that? Like you and I find someone like a CIO, and we get some of those signs, and we walk around the show pointing out what we think are the ones you should pay attention to. What do you think of that idea?
I will say that I neglected to mention earlier that one of the things I did on Sunday was I did go on the NRF sponsored tour of the Innovation Lab.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There is a section at Javits which features, I don't know, probably had 40 or 50 innovative, fast-growing tech firms. And so they do a little tour for analysts, about an hour, where we go to 10 of them and get a little pitch on each of them. And so they, curate the group. And I thought that was actually a very good way of, not that I couldn't walk around to all of these, but to have a subset of the group. And they ran a pretty tight ship where the founder basically can speak for 3 minutes, take questions for 2, and then you move on to the next one. So it's quite an efficient way. And I saw some interesting things. I'll just mention one really quickly. There was this firm, which I think is called Ariani. I may have totally screwed that up, which is creating NFTs, or has NFTs, to support loyalty programs for high-end retailers. And so this isn't so much about trading NFTs, though that's part of it, but it's really about having the customer own their own information and have all the, so many of their clients is a French firm, and they're working with a number of the European, mostly Swiss, I guess, watch companies, for example. So very high-end. So you get this NFT for your individual timepiece, and it's got all the information about it, plus some value-added pieces you get, or services and information you get on top of the product itself. And then if, because many of these watches end up being resold in vintage shops and things like that, then you have proof of authenticity, and you can track it and these kinds of things. So I think it's a pretty interesting application. I think NFTs for loyalty programs, particularly higher-end ones, is kind of an interesting area. I want to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, it might be there. And I guess if we couldn't wrap up, as I mentioned, I did a store tour, so I wanted to shout out to the folks and the different retail doing a fantastic job. What I saw, and a couple of them are going to be on the podcast. So, we went to a couple of Leap stores. So we've got the founder of Leap, this store as a service concept, super interesting. I went to the Citizenry. We've had the founders on the podcast. We went to the new Soho Target store, and we've had some folks from Target on, and so lots of really interesting retailers we wanted around, and we recorded lots of interesting guests for the podcast. So we took advantage of all those people there at the same time. So tune in, because we've got a lot of great content. Last thoughts?
I think the only thing I would add is, despite some of the more gloom and doom headlines of late, and what seems to have been a relatively lackluster holiday season, and what will likely be a pretty lackluster quarter for many of the retailers, I really felt like people were pretty pumped up and excited about the future. Like, I didn't get this, kind of woe is me Eeyore kind of vibe at all, which is exciting to see. I hope it will be, the case that, there certainly are plenty of things to be optimistic about, even if we do encounter some pretty stiff headwinds, to use the overall. I saw the other day that people said headwinds is now replacing unprecedented. So as the favorite term in retail, but so I don't want to abuse that too much.
Yeah. Well, there we go. I can tell one thing to listeners: we'll be covering it for the podcast. We just kicked off season 6, so lots of great content coming up, and of course, on a week-to-week basis, we kind of put our hand on the pulse of retail. So we'll be keeping a close eye on it. And for now, let's leave it there. Steve, thanks again for joining me on the mic and for being my partner in this. Appreciate you, my friend, and looking forward to more of the rest of our season and seeing you in person. Safe travels, everybody. If you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, your favorite podcast platform, so you can catch up with all our great interviews, including Organized for Growth, our interview with Satish Mahatra, CEO of The Container Store.
New episodes of Season 6 presented for another season by our friends at Marketile will show up each and every Tuesday. And be sure and tell all your friends and colleagues in the retail industry all about us.
And I'm Steve Dennis, author of the best-selling book, Remarkable Retail: How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant, keynote speaker and producer, and host of a series of retail trade podcasts, including this one. You can learn even more about me on LinkedIn, and you can catch up with Steve and I in person at Shop Talk in Vegas, March 26th, and a month later in Barcelona at the World Retail Congress, April 25th. Until then, safe travels, everyone.